You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Ethan Haristodoulou.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron and to a big news update for spring football as the USFL and XFL are reportedly set to merge and combine into one massive spring football league. This has a lot of implications and a lot of things to dive into, so make sure you comment down below your thoughts and opinions on all of this and your thoughts and opinions on what I have to say about it. But we're going to dive right into the thick of things. But like I said, USFL and XFL are set to merge. Axios dropped the bombshell scoop yesterday morning. The merger is going to set both leagues up to be as equal partners, which means that there's going to be some give and take from both sides in this merger here. If you don't already know, Fox Corporation owns the USFL, where Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, his former I guess you should say ex-wife, Danny Garcia, and Redbird Capital Partners own the XFL, and the deal could be officially set in stone and announced anytime, potentially this week or in the very, very near future. So there is a lot to get excited about with this. I know there are some people that probably aren't happy with it, but for myself, as somebody who loves spring football, or just football as a whole, I guess I should say, this is something that I think is going to benefit both leagues in the long run, and honestly benefit those of us that are fans of the spring football that we've been getting the last couple of years. James Larson, for those of you that don't know, of Pro Football Newsroom, excellent reporting source on all things spring football, later reported on after that bombshell report that it was a Redbird Capital Group that reached out to the USFL in regards to this merger here. It's worth noting that the XFL did end up losing roughly about $60 million in their first season of operation, and it's well known that Redbird Capital Group has also been looking to recoup some of their losses, so to hear that they were the ones that reached out to maybe try to help in that process of recouping, not too surprising there. And then in a later tweet earlier today, I guess, what was it, maybe like 35 minutes ago prior to me recording this, he actually went on to report as well that it sounds like not all 16 teams are going to be making the cut for the hopeful 2024 season that they want to have everything finalized by. It sounds like it could be somewhere along the lines of like 8 to 12 teams, give or take, and it's pretty much teams that don't have a current home location that are in hot water. And we'll get a little bit more into that down the road here as we go through this video here, but that is a lot worth noting. And then Neil Stratton from Inside the League, also reporting this yesterday, stated that it sounds like talks have been going on since as early as July. So it's been a little bit now. What are we in? September? So the last couple of months, this has been something that's been going back and forth between both sides here. And both leagues have put pretty much all development plans to a halt while they discuss this merger and try to get a deal finalized. But it looks like from the sound of everything, we're going to get this merger done and in full effect come this next spring season of football, whenever that ends up being, whether they end up taking over the USFL schedule or the XFL schedule. We are going to get a combined league as soon as the end of this NFL season rolling into the spring, which is really, really exciting. Now, as for like things to expect with this all, now that's pretty much all the news we have to this point. We're all just at this point speculating now and trying to see, what could we expect from this all. First and foremost, teams are going to fold, and I think that kind of goes without saying. If it's expected that we're looking at teams that don't have home stadiums on the hot seat, you look at teams from the USFL like the Gamblers, the Stars, the Generals. There's a handful of teams that don't have a home location, as the USFL obviously opted for a hub style of fitting for teams for the last couple of seasons and have expanded as they've worked their way through the last couple of years. Then you, of course, have teams like the Birmingham Stallions, the DC Defenders, Memphis Showboats, St. Louis Battlehawks, teams that I consider just locks that are going to make this league, that have massive fan bases and honestly have already created strong cultures that you cannot risk losing. So they're obviously going to carry over. I would look at those teams like the Gamblers, the Generals, maybe the Houston Roughnecks if they opt to decide for one. You could maybe go for one or the other. I know the Roughnecks have dealt with some issues in regards to their branding being so similar to the Oilers. I know they kind of got into some hot water for that, so maybe they opt to drop the Roughnecks and keep the Gamblers since they're both Houston teams, things like that. The Vegas Vipers played on an atrocious field this past season. They're probably a team that's as good as gone right now. And it's also worth noting that the USFL currently owns the rights to all classic USFL team names. So while they can sit here and try to figure out, which teams are going to stick, which teams are going to go, and how things are going to look down the road here if we're not getting all 16 teams right out of the gates, the USFL does own the rights to every single classical USFL name here. And I do think that's important because I know there are a lot of people who are really pumped about the USFL coming back that were fans in the 80s during that short 3-year run that they had. And I think that historical value does hold some weight, especially down the road, because football, it's a historical sport. I feel like the history when it comes to football is massive, and it's very important to a lot of people. And it's one of those things that if you can retain as much historical what is the word I'm trying to say here, is if you can retain as much historical property, whether it's naming, paying respects to past players and greats that made it to the NFL from the USFL once they shut things down, or just played during the time that they were in the USFL before making the jump to the NFL. I think it's very important to keep all that intact if you can. On top of that, I did have this noted here, and I am going to bring it up, but it does sound likely that we're going to be getting each and every single team in their home market going forward. And I think that's going to be a very big positive. However, if things don't work out, I would be curious to see if maybe they opt for a hub system in any sort of capacity. Me personally, I would love to see them just get every single team in their home market. It's probably been my biggest gripe for the USFL, but it has been a big positive for the league in helping them stay financially in the green. Whereas, again, you look at the XFL with the amount of money they spent on stadium rights for their spring season, it did hurt them financially, and they found themselves $60 million in the red. Hence why we're kind of getting this merger right now. So the way I look at it, as far as sticking teams in their home stadiums or how they handle that whole situation, it's going to come down to really two big things. One, how much are both sides willing to fork over, especially looking at Redbird Capital, because they've already lost money and are in the process of trying to figure out ways to recoup money. I know they want return on investment. So with that in mind, how much more are they willing to shovel out and potentially lose, with the hopes that down the road they'll get money back? Fox, massive company, billion-dollar company. They've got all the money in the world. I don't really see why they would be worried about spending too much, especially if they're able to bring in these already established teams with names, again, like the St. Louis Battlehawks and the DC Defenders being prime examples of that. It's really going to just come down to how much money is basically thrown around by either side. I do think something that could help with this whole thing, and we kind of saw this from both of the leagues, is if they pick their home markets, wherever they all wind up being at, all the teams, and then they go ahead and just take one. So you kind of get like a hybrid. You get every single team in their home stadium, but you get a hub system for practice and during the week general operations. I think that would probably be the smartest way to go, because rather than having to find 8 locations for these teams to practice in, because they're not going to be practicing in their home stadiums, you find one singular location that can house all 8 of these teams, and you just have to schedule your practices around that. However they do that, you can find a facility that houses a handful of football fields, I'm sure somewhere, wherever that winds up being. I'm sure there's got to be a place in Texas they could do that. You have all these teams practicing in the same location. All the operations are based in the singular location. And then your travel expenses are really just sending the teams out to where they're playing that week and then bringing them all back. You can centralize housing for all the players, where they're all going to stay. They don't have to live in the home areas of where they're playing. Everyone could stay central to one location, and all you have to do is just head out and go to that one place you're playing in that week for that singular day, and then just get yourself right back once the game is wrapped up and you're staying there for the rest of the week until the following week's games. That's kind of how I think things are going to play out. So I think we might get some sort of a hybrid type deal where teams play in their home location, but operations, practices, things like that are probably going to take place in one singular spot. That just would make a lot of sense to me on the business side of things. Now, switching gears and going from expectations into what I want to see, this is where opinions start to come into play and just hopes for the whatever this league ends up being beyond from 2024 and onward. I'll start things off with the branding. I personally, and I know there might be some bias in this because I am a person that covers the USFL. I did not choose to cover the XFL. I would like to keep USFL branding as far as the league is concerned. And there's a few reasons for that. Not just because I'm a USFL homer, no, but because of the historical factor. And I already kind of brought that up earlier. We're trying to retain as much of the history of USFL football as a whole, I think is key to the success of spring football going forward, in a sense that it keeps people that loved the league years and years ago, and I know there are a lot of you that watch my channel for the USFL content that were fans in the 80s. I've talked to plenty of you in the comments section down there, so for those of you that don't think this is important, it is. There's a lot of people that loved the USFL back then, and we're excited to see it come back, and we're bringing their kids to go see the football league that they used to watch when they were kids. That is important. The historical factor is significant. Whereas when you look at the XFL, it has a muddied past. In 2001, it was the Vince McMahon wild, edgy spinoff, went for a season and folded. You had guys named He Hate Me playing in the league. Second time around, unfortunately, didn't get to finish the season, got shut down because of the pandemic that we were dealing with. Not their fault, but victim of circumstance. And now you have this situation where XFL season 3.0, successful, I would say, in terms of spring football standards. However, you do kind of have the taste of, okay, this league struggled financially big time, and now they're reaching out trying to find partners because the financial situation is probably not where they were expecting to be coming out of year one. I just feel like in terms of branding with historical factor, and not to mention the USFL, I think, has done a better job with, like the merchandising. They did a much better job than the XFL in terms of who handled their jersey sales and just the production of those jerseys. I've seen what USFL jerseys look like. I've seen what the XFL replica jerseys look like. And I've got to say, not really impressed with what the XFL did. That's not me taking jabs. That's just like, as a football fan, if I was to have received what I saw some XFL fans were getting as a jersey and paid the money that they paid for them, I don't care if you're just supporting the league, I would have been pretty pissed and returned it. Whereas I've been very impressed with what we've gotten from the USFL and their stuff like that. The other thing beyond that, the USFL, they went and established a trading card set already. I've opened a single box already, and I'm planning on opening another one. They have the e-cards as well. I just feel like in terms of merchandising and tangible things that fans can get their hands on, I was a little bit more impressed with what the USFL has done. Granted, I haven't seen any of the XFL stuff in person, but that jersey stuff just left a really bad taste in my mouth. And I was someone that was even considering getting something like a DC Defenders or a St. Louis Battlehawks jersey, because those are two teams, while I didn't really watch the XFL too much or pay too much attention to it, it was fun watching those two teams. And I'm actually a really big fan of the way the DC Defenders uniforms look. So it was something that I considered, but then took a hard pass on once we saw what the product wound up looking like. So branding, merchandising, all that, I do really like what the USFL has, and that's something that I think is worth mentioning. As for league structure, how do I want to see this league set up and look like going into 2024? I'm going to start off by saying I think 12 teams is kind of the golden number that you could start out with for this year. We're obviously going to see some teams fold, and we're going to lose some names. That's fine. But if you go with 12 teams, you can at least set up a miniature version of like what the NFL has going on. And I'll dive into more of that in a second, but that is part of why I'm bringing this up here. If you go 12 teams, you have 4 divisions, 3 teams each division. So you have a more sizable league, and it's not just one singular division of 4 teams, one singular division of 4 teams, like how both leagues housed this past seasons. I want to see that set up of 4 divisions, and for simplicity, we'll just call it the North, South, East, and West Division. Obviously, that's probably not going to be the naming because these teams don't necessarily reside in those areas, but just for simplicity's sake, that's what we'll go with. Then your playoff format can be 6 teams. You have 4 division winners, 1 from each division, and then on top of that, you can have a couple of wild card teams. This also allows for you to set up the playoffs to be a 6-team format where the number 1 and number 2 team in the league in terms of overall standings gets a bye week, and then you have the other 4 teams playing in the first initial week. This helps you expand the playoffs a little bit more, and it gives the playoffs a bigger feel. One thing I was not a fan of, and this goes for both spring football leagues, is just you have the singular first week of teams battling it out, and then boom, championship game. I would like to see the playoffs expanded just a little bit more. And by having a bye week, you add even more on top of just home field advantage for teams to really strive to be that number 1 or number 2 team in their respective spring football league. Now, beyond that, why am I stressing the 4 divisions so much in this kind of styled format? It kind of ties into my final hope and something that I would like to really see down the road here. Obviously, the golden goose, I would say, for spring football right now is, of course, the NFL partnership. How can we make a spring football league that can intertwine with the NFL that helps both the spring football league and the NFL? Well, you look at what the XFL did. They already kind of locked up a partnership with them, allowing players to move back and forth between the leagues. USFL was reportedly in talks with the NFL in the early stages as well. I want to see the USFL or Spring Football League, whatever it winds up being, but in my hypothetical scenario, I'd still call it the USFL. I want it to become a full-blown feeder system. And I know some people are not a fan of that, but I think for the longevity of the league and for the immediate success of the league and for down the road to get better talent, you becoming a feeder system for the NFL solidifies you as a league. It helps you gain fan interest from fans of the NFL, and it gives fans of the NFL not only interest, but a reason to invest, and here is how. In this hypothetical partnership, the NFL teams are assigned specific divisions that they can pick for their team, and they can pull off at any point. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because it would look something along the lines like this. As I mentioned earlier, we have a North Division, a South Division, a West Division, and an East Division. That's for the Spring Football League we get in 2024. From there, the respective 2 North Divisions, East Divisions, South Divisions, and West Divisions of the NFL get assigned those teams as their feeder teams. What does this do? Well, it gives fans from all 8 of those teams a reason to have interest in that division that is respective to their team, to watch, to not want their opposing teams to pick up players, to want players to succeed, because if they're doing well, it's a potential person that they could be bringing onto their roster and maybe a contributor down the road. The situation would look something like this. If you're a Ravens fan and a Browns fan, both fans love their teams. They're also slightly paying attention to now spring football because they could potentially be picking people up from the North Division of this spring football league. Someone is having a very strong season at wide receiver. Maybe that's somebody that catches their attention. They don't want their opposing team, whoever it may be, division rival or any other North Divisional team in the NFL, to pick up that player that they're watching and seeing succeed in this spring football league. It gives those fans a reason to invest and a reason to watch. I feel like the goal right now for spring football leagues, or this spring football league here, is to get as much viewership and as many eyes on the league as possible. But not only that, give these other people that are eyes and ears and people that are viewing this league a reason to invest. I feel like investment is probably bigger than just the viewership alone, because yes, you can get people to see what's going on here, but you want people to actually care about it. And in this scenario here, we have more eyes watching, more people are invested, more people are coming back. They'll tell other people to check this league out. They'll tell fans of their respective teams, pay attention. This guy is going off in this league and we have rights to pick him up. We don't want the Ravens to get him. We don't want the Patriots to get him because I'm a fan of the Browns or the Dolphins, whatever it may be. It gives that investment, that purpose to the league, and I think it helps strengthen the brand of football. I understand some people are in that position where they don't want to see the USFL, the XFL, this spring football league, whatever it is, to become a feeder system, and they want it to be a rival to the NFL. Unfortunately, at this stage in the game, this early on, that is such a far gone thought in the process. The NFL is a multi-billion-dollar company. You, at this point, cannot compete. It would need drastic results to even sniff the idea of competition. And it would take Fox Sports and probably another conglomerate of investors, billions of dollars in investment, to really want to go after the NFL and give you an alternative. And then there's, you're missing the name value. Again, the historical factor is key. Part of the reason why some people don't care about spring football is because these leagues pop up. There's no real reason to be attached to them, but Hence why I brought up the USFL branding factor. At least people from the 80s and, that time period that grew up watching some stars that ultimately made it to the Hall of Fame level in the NFL have memories of the USFL and have carried that over into their fandom into their later years in the 2022, 2023 seasons, and have been bringing their kids along for the ride because those were the teams that they were watching back when they were kids. I think it's really important to give people a reason to invest, and being a feeder league is probably the best route to go, at least in this point in time. We can talk competing with the NFL way down the road, but right now, I think it is important to build that partnership with the NFL to get access to better talent and to give NFL teams a reason to want to work with this league here, and not just, here's an endorsement from the NFL. Yeah, we'll let you take some of our practice squad players and let them play for you while they're doing their stuff during the offseason. No, a full-blown feeder system is key to the success for this spring football league, whether it's called the USFL XFL, the USXFL is one thing I've seen thrown around, whatever it may be. It is important to establish a legitimate partnership with the NFL for the success of this league for now and beyond. But that is pretty much everything I have to say regarding the USFL and XFL merger to this point. It's a situation that is basically developing as we speak, so probably by the time I'm done recording this, something else would have come out. Who knows? But keep your eyes and ears open. I'll be talking about it as the situation continues to unfold. Again, Pro Football Newsroom is a great place to look at this. I know the USFL podcast had a big episode today talking about all that stuff. There's plenty of places to find all of that information. I appreciate you if you found your way here to watch the video from the beginning to the end. Make sure, again, you comment down below your thoughts and opinions on this all and everything I had to say. But that is it for me. I appreciate you all. I will see you all next time. Have a good one.